Thank you very much, Paul. Good morning, everybody. As with all of my colleagues on the floor, thank you very much to Oil and Gas for giving us this opportunity to talk to you this morning. I feel very much as if I'm tail end Charlie. Not only am I the last speaker this morning, but actually I'm the 9th speaker in terms of the series of breakfast that Oil and Gas was sponsored, or have held, I should say. And therefore it becomes quite challenging in terms of, well, what could I bring to the table this morning? And I bring to the table that might be a little bit unique. I think we do have a number of things that I can talk to you which are quite unique in terms of Fairfield. But the themes that you're going to hear from me are the same as the themes that have already been discussed this morning, have already been discussed in previous sessions. And you begin to extract from these sessions the themes that we ought to focus on. And what I'm going to try and do this morning is to not only tell you a little bit about Fairfield, but also put those themes into context. Previous speakers have talked primarily about exploration in a sense. I'm going to focus on one example of a mature asset and how those different aspects of our business play into mature field management. Cash is king, you've heard this morning. You'll hear that again in my talk. Funding is good. Running out of funding is bad. And, that's something that as an independent, we live day in, day out. And it's absolutely critical that in all of our activities, we're absolutely conscious of where we are in terms of our funding. Some of you may not have even heard of Fairfield. And as you read this slide, I guess there's 3 things that I would like you to take away from this slide. First of all, we are a young company. Actually, the key issue about Fairfield was arguably the transformational activity that we undertook in 2008 when we took on operatorship of the Dunlin, Osprey and Merlin producing fields. Second thing is that we are privately funded, private equity. We have a very robust, very good long-term relationship with our lead investor, Warburg Pincus. And I would say having that very good relationship with all of your investors absolutely critical to a small company, particularly where funding is so important. The other thing that I would say, it's on the middle of this slide, is that we're focused on mature assets. But in common with previous speakers, it's not just the mature assets, it's those assets where there's redevelopment opportunity. And that redevelopment opportunity spins out from detailed technical work and application of latest technology, seismic being the obvious one. But as well as thinking about mature assets and redevelopment opportunities, we also look in exactly the same as the previous speaker. How can we apply technology to help unlock reserves? So the Clipper South field that we are a joint venture partner in is an excellent example of where the application of single wellbore multi-fracking unlocks those reserves. And yes, you do need to take risk. It is about taking a risk. But at the same time, if you don't try, you don't succeed. Our core assets, well, I've already alluded to one area, which is the northern North Sea, with our producing assets in the Dunlin cluster area. I've also highlighted in this bit of the slide the 21127 quad, which many of you who know the geography of the North Sea will recognize as the area where Northwest Hutton was developed. Central North Sea we have interest in Central North Sea, and again, in common with previous speaker, we have used the farm down and carry concept very successfully. We're using it in the northern North Sea, and we're using it in the central North Sea, where the operator is proceeding towards project sanction on Crawford. We farm down our interest. That has allowed us to be carried as we move towards project sanction. And lastly, as I mentioned in my introduction, southern North Sea. Southern North Sea is where we have our interest in Clipper South, and the first development well was spudded this year. We've also, as you can see here, played in the exploration rounds. Absolutely core to our business is being active participants in exploration rounds. And actually we see the southern North Sea as a potential, the second core area for us moving forward. Now, on this slide as well, you will have seen this year 5 times, if you've bothered to read the slide. This year 5 times. We have activity in every one of our assets. We're moving every one of our assets forward. That means there's activity, but it also means we're consuming funding, whether that be from development carry or indeed our own funding. And that, when you think about moving all of these assets forward, is absolutely critical. You cannot have assets that are just sitting, doing nothing on your shelf, as it were. And in terms of our producing assets, just pick up on the fuel gas import project, because I want to come back to that in just a few minutes. But let's just set some context for you. So here we go, the Latelife field story. We've all been to morning sessions such as this, conferences, where we've talked about Latelife, mature fields, aging, extensions, etc., etc. But actually, it causes me to reflect back on my own career, and it was about 15 years ago that I was first involved in what was arguably the first life extension phase in the North Sea, when I was involved with the Hutton and the Murchison assets when they were transferred from the original owner, which of course was Conoco. And it's interesting to note that Hutton, of course, is now abandoned, and it was an infrastructure issue, it was a pipeline issue, which actually caused Hutton to tumble over. And if I think about Murchison, that's had 4 owners, the original Conoco, and subsequent to that, 3 other owners. So even in those 15 years, there's a lot of change, but of course, fundamentally, what has changed is the age of the installations and the age of the infrastructure. And if I now just put on, the words in the text boxes are not material. Don't worry about them. Just count the number of text boxes, because each box is an investment in terms of hard cash at a time when we're trying to move the asset from where it was with the previous owner to where we would like it to be in the future. Every one of those text boxes is an investment both in terms of cash, but more importantly, arguably, in terms of time. And this is a time when we are relying on funding because we haven't moved the installation from where it was to where we would like it to be. In other words, all we were doing is simply positioning the asset for its future. If I just drill down, pictures says it all, and just use this rather than reading the text. Here's a picture, obvious picture of the before and the after. And it just gives you a sense of the sort of investments that's required to simply position the asset for the future. It's amazing what you can do, but as we all know, it takes time and it takes real effort to make these brownfield modifications. In a previous, I think it was in the last breakfast session, one of the speakers referred to the independent as the brain surgeons of the North Sea. I quite like that concept, that we're brain surgeons. I don't know if this picture is really brain surgery, but I can assure you that as we were involved in this particular operation with the helicopter and lowering a very substantive piece of structure onto the Dunlin platform, it felt like brain surgery. Because you can imagine if it didn't quite work out, you may have created some damage. But this is an example of one of the key tenets of any independent. The independent must innovate. Business as usual doesn't work. One must innovate, whether it's a new tool downhole or actually addressing the way that we do brownfield modifications. What were we doing? We were simply making it safe. Pictures, I'm not throwing bullets at anybody, throwing rocks at anybody here. I'm just simply making a statement around what it was we were doing. So on the one side, on the left-hand side, you've got the old access towers to the flare, and on the right-hand side, you can see what we were actually lowering to position. We were simply putting in infrastructure. It was fabric maintenance, if you will. But it had to be addressed simply to put the installation in a fit position for what we believe will be many years of continued production. And so what's left? Have we finished that journey? We'll never be finished that journey. Aging is something that we're going to have to manage continuously. And on the previous slide where I referred to, this year, one of the titles was Fuel Gas Import Project. And we're just at the end of a £70 million investment in Dunlin Fuel Gas Import Project, which will create the stability, the reliability that we need going forward. You know, just positioning the installation and actually finishing what was started out, in other words, the original reservoir development plan, we know that can deliver 10,000 barrels a day. Just getting things working reliably. If it's safe, and those of you that work for Fairfield in the room know exactly what I'm going to say next. If it's safe and it's reliable and you have the technical expertise to understand the reservoir, you can predict the performance. When you predict that performance in terms of barrels, what you're really predicting is cash. When you know you're generating cash, you can move on to the next phase. So it's really important to get that safe, reliable, predict it, and then, of course, having generated what we believe is 10,000 barrels of oil per day, you can move on to the enhancement and actually moving 10,000 barrels a day to 15,000 barrels a day or beyond. We know we can do 10. We have the understanding we can move to 15. Now, 10,000 barrels a day, you know it, I know it, is not material to a major. Believe you me, it's absolutely material to an independent. And it's the independents that are going to be looking for those sort of volumes. And that, I think, is absolutely key to the future of the North Sea. So what are the lessons learned? What lessons can I take away from that? Well, I'm not going to stand here and lecture to a room full of people who absolutely understand the lessons. It takes longer. It costs more. Integrity is a bigger challenge than we ever anticipated. Planning and prioritization, balancing priorities, etc., etc. But the point that I would like to make this morning, and what I want to move on to now, really is the proposition, the challenge that I present, and that is the business context that the independent operates in. And that allows me to reflect back a little bit on what we call, well, what I call the Annus Horribilis for Fairfield 2010. And I suspect that you will have seen, if you've been in Aberdeen that long, those sort of headlines are actually anywhere in the UK. Previous speaker, Paul, was referring to 2008, 2009. 2010 was our difficult year. You know what? 2011 has been difficult. 2012 is difficult. The business context, the fundamental market conditions have changed. We recognized back when the time that we had pulled the IPO that there was something very, as far as Fairfield was concerned, had changed. And it caused us to fundamentally rethink our raison d'etre. What was it that we were trying to achieve? The equity markets had closed down, the banks had closed down. And that is where it is so important that for an independent, a very good, very honest, very forward-looking, very long-term relationship with your investors is absolutely critical. And we all talk about the independence in the future in the North Sea. Therefore, I think we must actually also acknowledge that funding issue, the access to funding. How do we get funding? And the demands of the private equity market, I believe, are different. And the question that I pose and want to now move into is, do our business behaviors, does our business context actually meet the needs of the private equity market? So funding is clearly critical to us, and this is these are actually the themes that we took away from the lessons learned that we did post the IPO. Access to funding I've already talked about, but I want to move on to exploration track record in the sense of what does the industry look like to the private equity investor, and of course decommissioning. So this is now where you begin to get the same themes emerging as you've heard in previous sessions. So I've called this slide exploration, or is it development, or is it redevelopment? I'm really not sure. The day before we decided to pull the IPO, our advisors were telling us, don't make too much of your exploration risk. You know, just play it as redevelopment. Actually, what we learned is that the private equity market, indeed any market, demands upside potential opportunity. And we had it in our portfolio. We just didn't play it as exploration. Northwest Hutton, you all recognize the picture. If we just drill subsurface for a moment, subsurface map, we all recognize it. If I was to say to you that up in the sort of the main fault, the northwest southeast block, big black line, that's where the Northwest Hutton platform used to be, and all the black dots that hopefully you can see were the development wells. Application of seismic, absolutely critical to us. We shot our own seismic over the area. What happens is we suddenly begin to see all sorts of opportunities, all popping out as a result of that new seismic. Is this exploration, development, or redevelopment? Well, let me now just lay on the drilling radius of the old platform. And suddenly it drops into place, in terms of my mind at least. There was a drilling radius. There is opportunity beyond the drilling radius. It definitely has exploration risk. But is it development or is it redevelopment? I'm really not sure. But this is a classic example, to my mind, of the North Sea. We've farmed this down. We're getting a development carry. That's, if you will, an example of lifeblood of the independent. But exploration, whether it is the independent or whether it's the major, we have to have exploration in our portfolios. But when I reflect on the pace that the exploration cycle seems to be going through at the moment, I really begin to question whether it's fit for the private equity markets going forward. Independence, private equity being part and parcel of the North Sea going forward. We've recently had experience of where between application and award, it took 2 years. And that's trying to build in a core area. You then layer on top of that the funding issue, the access to resource issue, rig capability or rig capacity, et cetera, and you suddenly realize that where things were, a cycle maybe was 2 or 3 years, it's gone from 2 or 3 years to double that, to 6 years, to 5 or 6 years. Is that really where the private equity market has choices to make? I can invest here or I can invest there. Is that pace really fit for the North Sea going forward? Now, moving from exploration, I want to turn to the development theme and moving back to Dunlin. I said that I mentioned the £70 million investment we made fuel gas import project, and actually we're making this investment. It's really an infrastructure issue or infrastructure capability issue that's causing us to make this investment. What is it? It's very simple. The project guys won't thank me for this, but the reality is it's a simple project. It's a 10-kilometer, 4-inch pipeline connecting 2 installations, which allows us to tap into the North Sea mains, as it were. If I look at the topsides modifications, just to sort of emphasize the simplicity, and brownfield is never simple. I'm not suggesting that, but I just want to get it in context. Ignore the big blue box, but the green boxes you can see on there summarize effectively what we've had to do topsides. It's meters, it's heaters, it's chromatographs. Of course, I could talk about pulling and risers and so on and so forth, but the fact is, it's not a big project. And so if you allow me to exercise my imagination just for a second, to me, this is a bit like the house, and I'm now tying it into the gas mains. And if you draw that parallel, if you allow me to explore that parallel, that entertains the idea of uswitch.com. If we were sitting at home and we were trying to change suppliers or something like that, we'd probably all go and look at uswitch.com. And if you really let your imagination play, you begin to ask yourself, well, what's wrong with the North Sea? Why can't we have, and I'm being a little bit tongue-in-cheek right now, but why can't we have the North Sea infraswitch.com? Because the reality is that tying this house into the mains, where we're only importing something over 5 to 10 million standard cubic feet a day, required 15 commercial agreements to be formalized. It required 10 side letters. It required 10 inter-operator letters. Now, you can imagine every one of those was a negotiation. Every one was a negotiation. We needed to have numerous face-to-face meetings, executive meetings. We had to engage and get the support of DEC, and I'd like to acknowledge that and thank them for that, because that was absolutely vital to moving this project forward. And all we're trying to do is position the asset for the future. Now, whether it's access to infrastructure, 15 agreements, 10 letters, and 10 this and 10 of that, or whatever, 6 man-years of commercial effort versus 10 minutes on uswitch.com. Clearly I'm using my imagination. I don't suggest that it's necessarily relevant for the North Sea. It is complicated. But on the other hand, I think in terms of the independent, we have to put this in context. Because could you imagine the conversation that we have with our investors around what is a simple job and why it took us 2 years to actually get to the situation we're in today, where we can actually import gas, gives us the power, gives us the reliability, etc. So turning to the last topic, and just about to bring this to conclusion, decommissioning. Markets don't like uncertainty. It doesn't matter whether you're the private equity market or the public equities market. They don't like uncertainty. And it was absolutely clear to us as we went through the IPO process that decommissioning was a material issue to the independent, to us as an independent, and I believe for future independents. And Tom made the point right at the beginning that you end up with these security arrangements with tens of millions of dollars locked up. And that is the fact, tens of millions of dollars locked up. That's tens of millions of dollars that isn't available to invest in the infrastructure, the facilities, or whatever it is, the drilling, whatever it is that we need to do. And so we were very, very pleased. And again, exactly as Paul made the point, you know, we were very active, very loud, some might say, in the debate with government to make sure government understood the issue, the decommissioning issue, in terms of the independent. What does it look like to us? Why are we concerned about having tens of millions of dollars locked up when we'd rather be investing it in our assets? And so we were delighted, A, to play a role in that, and B, of course, with the announcement made this year's budget. But I will say this, it would be an absolute travesty if after all the work that the independents, the majors have done, and with the support and the help of the likes of oil and gas, it's a travesty if in 12 months' time we can't stand here and demonstrate that we've broken the back of these decommissioning issues. If we haven't, then yet again, you know, I question whether the market, the business context that we're operating in is going to suit the private equities investors. So in conclusion, I think we are addressing all of the key issues. I've tried to use Fairfield as a put a little bit in context, but drawing on themes that the other speakers have used this morning. Cash is king, etc., etc. I think it is important that, these sessions, these breakfast sessions, are so important in terms of providing that context. Because I do feel at times that, you know, if you live in the major world, then that's fine, that's good, we've all been there. But the independent world is a very different place. It's actually a very tough place to be. And I think it's very good for me to actually use this opportunity to acknowledge that. And what I would like to do in closing is simply say thank you. In particular, I'd like to say thank you to the staff of Fairfield, because we have had a difficult time, but so have all the independents in terms of business context. So I'd like to thank the staff of Fairfield, some of whom are in the room this morning, because without them, and indeed with the long-term relationships we've got with the likes of our contracting partners, which is also critical to the independent, I wouldn't have been able to stand here and pose the questions that I have this morning. So thank you very much indeed.